This is The Joy of Democracy with me, Joy Silver. Straight Outta Rivco, Part 1, with your hosts, Anyse Smith and Francisco Ramos, interview Planning Commissioner Chris Castorena of Banning.
Hey everybody, my name is Anyse.
Francisco.
And we are Straight Outta Rivco. So today we're going to be talking about rural communities. And when we first kind of opened the show, we talked about wanting to make sure that all areas of Riverside County, often those places that are overlooked, still got a little bit of time with us especially, so we could talk about the things that matter, especially as it concerns communities that are often overlooked in normal conversation and discourse.
And we're glad to have our special guest today, Chris Castorena, who is a planning commissioner for the city of Banning. And for those familiar with the San Gorgonio Pass, Banning is in between Cabazon and the community of Whitewater. So as you're traveling east on the 10, you will certainly go through Banning and see the lovely downtown Marquee of the Fox. That's one of its more notable buildings in the past. So
great building.
It's a wonderful building.
I love that.
Thank you for being our guest today.
For being here.
Thanks so much, y'all.
You're welcome.
It's wonderful to be on here with you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, about your connection to the past.
Yeah, well, I was raised there pretty much my entire life. I also want to mention we have Morongo right next to us as well, which is really special. We have a very deep history that we need to be telling more of. The Serrano and Cahuilla people have given so much to the region, and they're not often told front and center in our stories enough. So just wanted to start with that. The San Gorgonio Pass has been a refuge for so many people for centuries. When things haven't worked in other places, folks have made a home. I want to show special love to Banning, particularly. I've been writing about this history a lot because I think it's important for us to not repeat the same mistakes, to know what mistakes were made initially. A lot of it comes down to our people not feeling like they belong when they're trying to make a home here.
Well, and even in the name, the pass, right? Many people would consider it a pass-through area, like, oh, I passed through on my way to the desert or on my way out of the desert trying to get to everywhere else, right? So it's kind of like embedded right there in the name, the pass.
Yeah, and we're way more than that. We have so many wonderful, talented people that grew up here. We have more transplants coming in too from LA, Orange County that are adding into the social fabric of our community. The problem is that they're also kind of passing back out for opportunity. Right? We don't have opportunity for our folks here. So folks are still spending a lot of times in their cars on the freeway away from home.
The description, like some people have called the past area or some of the past cities like bedroom communities, right? Like they live there, but they don't work there. Yeah. Or maybe they're not spending their money there.
It's a sad term, but it's also revealing. The most time that we spend, or majority of the time we spend our lives are laying down or asleep, right? That shouldn't be the only time that we're in our hometowns or in the cities that we call home. I think it's really important that anytime we have new developments coming in, that there's clear talent pipelines for our residents to make sure that they have jobs locally. Again, the more time that you can spend in your community, the more that you feel ownership toward the things that happen. You feel more obligated, right, to be active in the community. So these are things that simply just need to happen. We need to make sure that they're normalized because the things that have been normalized now in our systems are not normal.
Would you expand on that? Obviously, as Anyse mentioned, the pass is a place that people see, rush by at 60 miles an hour, obviously going to somewhere else or to Coachella, as many do from Los Angeles or from other places. What does the pass mean to you? And, particularly because we're talking about rural development, because it is, as you mentioned, next to Morongo and some rural areas in our county. What does development look like? What have you seen? And what do you think should happen so that the city obviously benefits from whatever development's coming?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. Rural development for me means a huge opportunity for us to personalize what it means to our neighbors. We're smaller, so we have more opportunity to talk to folks about what they want. Now, sometimes you talk to neighbors and they don't have an idea of what the good job or the good opportunity looks like because they're so focused on having to drive out of the city to work and spending their time doing that, to put food on the table, to provide for their families. So we have to offer grace and make sure that we're offering solutions that are respecting their wants and needs, where they can actually stay within our city for good opportunity. And as a planning commissioner, I mainly oversee our land use development.
You're a planning commissioner for the city of Banning.
I am. I'm actually the youngest planning commissioner for the city of Banning, which I would say isn't actually impressive. It's more an indictment on our systems. We don't have very many young people in cities in general, particularly small cities that step up into these roles or have been provided the pathway to become a commissioner for your city or a city council person. In fact, it's something I'm very passionate about. Right? The brain drain, our young people leaving after they graduate high school. From a very young age, we're told, I'll speak from personal experience, that if you want to be successful, you need to run for the hills because opportunity doesn't live here.
You know, I think you bring up something interesting about opportunity because the Pass area has about 100,000 people, mostly focused between Banning and Beaumont. And Beaumont, I read, is actually or was one of the fastest growing cities in the state of California. So I wonder how you maybe kind of reconcile that between a place being the fastest growing, but also what kind of opportunities come with that growth, right? For the people that you're talking about. Is that something that you've seen? Have you seen a lot of opportunities come along with that growth in the past, or what do you think?
Yeah, another great question. The fastest doesn't always mean the best. And I keep using, I've said opportunity a lot, and that's investment language. A few years ago, our city changed our motto to endless opportunity. People go into council chambers when they're advocating for a project and they point to the crest and talking to council and the community, and they say, you say you're about endless opportunity, but you say you're about endless opportunity, so hopefully you'll pass this. Now, it would seem as if we aligned our language to outside investors to fit the last administration at the time. They kept, opportunity zones were a big thing, tax incentives for big investors to come in and subsidize their investment. And it was supposed to benefit the community. We haven't really seen that. You see communities oftentimes, or cities oftentimes, orienting themselves toward outside investment. What I hear from our residents is that they feel the developments that are coming in aren't for them at all.
Talk about some of that. What would be an example of one development that has not, in maybe your opinion or maybe the city's opinion, as a resident or as a business owner, has it made a great impact economically on the city?
I can't talk specifically about any particular development, but what I can tell you, our bread and butter, what a good development looks like, is one that honors and respects the residents that already live there. So in the bigger developments, you have something called the developer agreement. It's a long document filled with a bunch of legalese, very complicated, very complex. And oftentimes, the promises you hear verbally, if they aren't in that agreement, they don't exist. They will not happen. So on Planning Commission, I think it's really important that, we're talking about land use, and directly intertwined with that is the economics of it. Do the economics make sense? If you're talking about opportunities to us, what are the opportunities? Are the opportunities going to directly benefit the residents, and are they going to have access to them and obtain them? Or are we going to get some good jobs, but they're going to be for folks that are going to be traveling in? Oftentimes, it's the latter.
Well, how do people even find out about this stuff, right? Because as you said, people are going to work, life is in session, a lot of things happening, in the world, in the state, in the county, in our cities. So by the time people may even be aware of this, they're seeing construction happening, right? Or they're hearing about something from a friend, or they might be seeing, whatever, a sign on the road, coming soon. So how do people find these things out? But by the same token, like balancing all of you mentioned it a little bit earlier, like the demands of life, right? Because how do I know, maybe it's like, okay, this thing is coming. I don't know if it's going to benefit myself, my family, if it's going to negatively impact my health. Like I am just, a regular everyday person who may not be as civically engaged as you are, particularly as a young person. So how do we address that? How do we get more young people and really everybody to really start paying attention and balance that with all the demands of everyday life?
Yeah, thank you, Anyse. Well, first, we're using very complex language to describe really fundamental, simple things.
I like big words.
I think
do.
certain people like
words. Okay.
Until it backfires on you and
Right.
you end up with something that you didn't realize was
Mhm.
the case, right? I think our governments have moral obligations to our residents to meet them at their doorstep, quite literally. I've been doing door knocking as a planning commissioner because sometimes when big projects come in that are going to impact some neighbors to that potential development, I want to know directly from them. What do you think? What do you know about it? How do you feel? Majority of the time, residents have never had their doors knocked on. They've never been canvassed. They've never been talked to. They've never been asked. They've never had someone come up and ask to listen first.
Wow.
That's a key thing. When we talk about rural development, any type of development in good faith starts with listening. And otherwise, we're cosplaying. Right? We're faking outreach. And I think oftentimes we do a lot of fake outreach because it's easier. It's very difficult to hear things that maybe aren't put in the nicest terms because people are so angry because they feel disillusioned and left behind. So when we talk about moral obligations, quite literally it means the government showing up at your door, if that is the best way to reach you, to consult with you, because we're all experts in our lived experiences. And if we're not tapping into that brain trust, I mean, it's disrespectful.
We're missing out.
What are you hearing? What are you hearing from your neighbors?
They can't afford to live in Banning. They can't afford to live in my hometown, their hometown anymore. That's heartbreaking.
And you're talking about long-term residents as well that are now being priced out of their home that they've called their home for generations or, many, many years.
They're thinking about moving further inland. They're thinking about moving to another state. They don't see a path forward. And we're not giving them any reason to. We're so quick to blame the individual. You got to pull yourself up. It's on you. Even though my tax dollars are going to plans to fund infrastructure, oftentimes the most decaying infrastructure is on your east side of town. That's nationwide. There's one of my favorite books that talks about this is The Color of Law, that it explains how this has been legislated at the local level, your city ordinances, your city laws. It's a little bit more difficult in your rural communities to find that. It's more like of the word of mouth. That's why it's easier to pinpoint in your bigger cities because they have a much more sophisticated way of documenting, right? These systems of violence, but they nonetheless exist. It doesn't take too much to walk down an east side and notice that it's a lot hotter because there's a lot less tree coverage. There's much fewer sidewalks that exist. And we're told that we're asking for too much, or we're told because you don't have the rooftops or you don't have the income enough, that your area doesn't have enough income that you don't deserve it. They put it in much nicer terms, but disrespectful nonetheless.
What would you change in that conversation? What have you changed as a planning commissioner to elevate that conversation or make people feel more included in the government to citizen communication pipeline?
Sure. I want to be clear. The issues that we're talking about are not unique just to Banning.
Of course.
A majority of communities are facing the same thing. We ignore particular groups of a community depending on your age, your gender, your ethnicity, quite literally the neighborhood that you live in. These aren't new. This isn't new information, right? As a planning commissioner, I've respectfully scrutinized any project that comes in, and I ask one of the basic questions of, have we done outreach to the neighbors that this project is going to be impacted by?
To their door, like you said.
Yeah. When I first got on, we didn't get training for a year on how to be a planning commissioner. We had to be self-taught. Luckily, I learned early on in my life to do a lot more listening, to be more still at first, to fully understand. So I'm not just shooting, from the hip, so to speak. We had a 1,000,000-square-foot warehouse that was being proposed. And we were going off of state law, which mandates, this was 2025, AB 98 has since passed, that strengthened the community protections against the warehousing industry, logistics industry. Well, state law says you only need to do outreach within 300 square feet of the project.
Sounds small.
If it was over 250,000 square footage of a development, you only needed to do outreach within 300 feet. That meant only 5 property owners got notice of this development. Property owners, not renters. So obviously a huge concern and scary. None of the renters, we had an affordable housing development that was right across the street from it. None of them got outreach. We had all of these houses right along the street where the truck route is now. We changed it to make sure that it wasn't just homeowners, but it was renters and just residents generally who would get outreach within 1,000 square footage. When we rely on these outside rules at times, they don't meet the mark, particularly in rural communities. So we get kind of left over and subjected to extractive developments or, again, developments that leave us behind or don't think about us because the laws don't.
And when we're talking about development, right? I'm curious because I don't think you're saying that you're anti-development, That's not what I'm hearing from you. But it's kind of like development that's mindful and takes the impact on that it will have on the community, right? Because, warehousing is a big debate. It has been, the IE is one of the largest warehoused areas in the United States now. And that's generated, some money. How much, I don't know. But it's generated some money and some jobs and various things. But by the same token, what about the environmental impact, right? What about the health impact?
The traffic.
Right? All of these things that impact the community, the roads get torn up. So how do you, just in your opinion, because I think many cities right now are looking for different ways to bring in revenue so that with that revenue, then they can spend, and do all these other things that they would like to do, right? Endless, opportunity, possibilities, whatever it is. They want to do those things, but is warehousing the only path toward that? Is that the only way, particularly for rural communities?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, we're constantly given a false choice. We can either have one or the other. I don't think that is real. We can't buy into that thinking. The region, our economic development plan at the region, I work for the governor's office of business and economic development, the California Jobs First region-based economic development strategy. So instead of the state telling the Inland Empire what they need to do, the region brought together a bunch of community partners from the industry, from business to community-based organizations to general residents, and asked them what they wanted. My other job outside of the governor's office was at Inland Economic Growth and Opportunity, overseeing the IE California Jobs First initiative. We pinpointed because people said that they wanted good local jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Go figure. You want to not have to be in your car a majority of your life to get a
It
paycheck.
would be nice.
Right? Yeah, you don't want to rely on the gig economy. The jig economy?
Both ways.
Jigga.
Either way. You shouldn't have to work multiple jobs to put food on your plate, right? We, from all of that, came to advanced manufacturing, clean technology, cybersecurity. That's where the state investment is also going. We could do the same thing in the past. We could be California's energy corridor. We already have decades of investment in, we see those, that's the one thing that we see on the freeway, right? So we have a lot of options. We need to have strategy. The city, my hometown, we just came out with a strategic plan. We mentioned that we needed a strategy when it came to economic development, but we didn't name the strategy. There's a huge opportunity. The other part of it is making sure that the residents are front and center in any of that development, so it isn't extracted.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And making sure that our small businesses are not lost. Our small businesses in any local economy are the lifeblood. They're the lifeline. We need to make sure that our dollars stay local. When we talk about big box stores, we're talking about a majority of the dollar, a dollar that you spend, a majority of it goes to headquarters out of state. We forget oftentimes that the best investment that we can make is in our neighbors. Instead of always trying to please these, folks out of our own cities.
Conglomerates.
Yeah, conglomerates. People are scared, they're angry, they're disillusioned. You get mad at them for not being civically engaged. But also, can you blame them? Right? We need to meet them where they're at their doorsteps.
This has been part one of Straight Out of Rivco with your hosts, Anyse Smith and Francisco Ramos, and their interview with Chris Castorena, Planning Commissioner for the City of Banning. Part two, coming soon, right here on United American Network. And this has been Joy Silver with the Joy of Democracy.